It's all the stories that matter
and the people behind them.
You're plugged into
Your Story on 947 Drive with Thando.
Ladies and gentlemen, he joins us live. John Robbie's in the building. Welcome.
Thank you. I feel like I'm at my funeral.
No.
There's R.I.P. Here's some highlights.
Well, you get to see it. It's like being at your funeral. Exactly.
It's a great honor to be here, guys. Thank you very much indeed. But Thando,
yeah,
don't stop my go.
Wow,
Don't
John.
stop my go.
Thank you. I mean, he knows. Did you research me, John?
I say nothing.
No, really, it's such an honor to have you here today. I my introduction to talk radio was definitely through you. I was not interested. I'm from a music radio background, and I mean what you managed to do over the years. My only regret is that I didn't start listening to 702 sooner. But yeah, what a journey you've had, what a life you've had, right? From rugby fields to the radio. I want to start right at the beginning because we were listening to you on 702, but we weren't with you in Ireland when you were that rugby player. Tell us what that's like. What's growing up in Ireland like?
Well, I was very, very lucky. I mean, I grew up in, everyone says I had an idyllic childhood. Well, I did. Everyone sort of says, you're Mr. Ireland here, but I don't have a drop of Irish blood in me. My father was from Scotland and my mum was from Wales. Both sadly passed on. My mum aged 99 3 years ago, still living at home. Can you believe it? And my dad was in the Navy during the war, the Merchant Navy, and then got married quite late in life, had 4 children in a row. I always said, did you have any other hobbies? So suddenly had to get a job, and he got a job in Dublin running the Guinness boats. Guinness, the big beer company, they used to ship Guinness over to Liverpool and Manchester for the north of England and Scotland, and they had boats which carried these over. My dad was in charge, so I was born and grew up in Ireland, and my mum's father was Welsh, and he was a big rugby fan, and I adored my granddad, and I used to go and watch rugby with him, and it was, they say a sport, you don't choose a sport, it chooses you, and rugby chose me, and that for a long, long time was absolutely my whole life.
Is there anybody in the world that has played for 2 nations, or at least been selected for 2 nations other than you?
There are. I mean, John Allen, for example, South African, played for the Springboks and Scotland. But it was common many, many years ago, then wasn't common.
Yes. And
then it's nowadays, in fact, people who've got 1 cap after, I think it's 5 years, can go back to the country of their birth to prevent them. But I mean, that's a technical issue. But it's interesting listening to you talk, because I love that phrase, the older I get, the better I was, you know, and you talk about radio and everything and rugby, and I made every mistake in the book, but I'm proud to have made a bit of a contribution, and as I say, to be here is a great honor. But the amazing thing is how nervous I am. You think
nervous,
about
Johnny.
it.
Like, John, if you're nervous, I'm not okay right now.
30 years in radio, and you think you'd get, feel okay with it. But I think that I was more nervous during my final show on the radio than I was on my first. And of course, people say once you lose those nerves, then you've lost your edge, So it's interesting, but it's lovely to be. I'm a bit worried about the fact I can see you out there in the green room. Yeah. And they have these cameras on, and I'll tell you a very funny story. I was always prepared. That was my big thing, was preparation, like I knew your catchphrase, okay? Prepare. And I learnt that from a guy called Alan Jones.
In Australia.
The legendary Alan Jones, who's fallen from grace now, but in terms of technique was the greatest radio man ever, talk radio man ever, and I learned so much from him. And he used to prepare, and before him he would have 40 pieces of paper with notes, with intros, with punchlines, everything done. And of course this was the magic, that when you listened to him, he just sounded terrific. He sounded fantastic. But in fact, he'd prepared so well. And then when this business of, I can see him, the camera came up, I was furious. I said, this is going to take away the magic of radio.
Also, wasn't the beauty that we didn't know what you looked like, John?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Good face for radio. Yeah, I heard it before. I heard it before.
What you look like.
I heard it before. I was just beginning to like you, Tam. Anyway, 702 said, no, we've got to do this because we've got to do these podcasts and online and all this sort of stuff. And I fought against it, you see. And the more I fought against it, the more they said, no, we've got to do it. We've got to do it. And I was furious. I didn't often throw tantrums, but I was absolutely furious. And then the one day I came in and there was the camera up there and I was furious. And at the end of the show, in fact it was the beginning of the show, they all came in laughing. It was a plastic camera.
Oh, it was fake. What was it about cameras that made you so infuriated?
No, it was because it took away the magic of radio, of talk, of preparation. Preparation, you'd be there, you'd cut something, you had an intro that had been shortened, whatever.
Yes.
And it was that, it was almost like playing a musical instrument with 40 pieces of paper. If it was too serious, you could put in a joke. If it was a little bit serious, a little bit funny, lighthearted, you could suddenly bring it serious. And it was like playing this musical instrument. And I always felt that the magic
is it people not
seeing, etc. But I suppose things move on.
And preparation is something you did very well. This is a story. If you're on the radio, everybody knows. And if you arrive late, they're like, "Oh, John Robbie used to get you at 2:15 in the morning." Or woke up at 2:15 in the morning.
2:15. Again, I'm a South African, but a very simple Irish South African, let me put it that way. And when I went to see the great Alan Jones, when we went and, maybe we'll talk about the changeover from music to
yes,
talk,
I'd love to.
Because it happened literally overnight, and I believe over a bottle of whiskey, but I haven't had that confirmed between Rena Broomberg and Stan Katz. But anyway, they sent me over because we were literally making it up.
So let's go back. Sorry, I want us to do this in nice chronological order. Many people don't know that 702 was a music station that rivaled 5. Is that correct? 5 FM?
We preceded 5. We were the hot music station. It was irreverent. It was John Burks. It was Stan Katz.
What music were you playing?
It was Gary. It was rock and roll music. And of course, we actually played black people's music.
And this was
in the old South Africa.
Apartheid South Africa.
Yes, but it broke down so many barriers. But the real barrier it broke down was it was irreverent. It was, and in those days, that was a protest. That was revolution, making fun of the government, making fun of things like that. Then a guy called Malcolm Russell, and we had a terrible signal based in Bophuthatswana. Try explaining that to your children. Bophuthatswana. And we had this dreadful signal. And then a guy called Malcolm Russell, who very, very nice, talented guy, he said, hold on, we can do this. So they started off Radio 5. Same, irreverent. They poached Alex J. They poached Martin Bailey from 702. So you had 2 irreverent stations, one with a great signal. So who would you listen to? So
the one with the great signal,
down. So overnight we turned talk radio, and that was how it started.
And you were doing talk radio, and I wasn't born, but from from those who tell your story or who listened to you in those days, speak about how you've just mentioned it, spoke almost against the apartheid government. In fact, white South Africans are calling you the K Boetie.
It's bizarre. Now, I know you know Trevor Noah.
Yes.
Don't ask me how I know. Call it research. But Trevor Noah is my hero. I've never met him, never spoken to him.
Wow.
Because what he did going to America as an outsider, particularly from darkest Africa, or darkest Africa, as Trump would say, and to take over that show is it's unbelievable. In broadcast, it's totally unbelievable. Now, so I've said this many, many times, and some people said, but in a funny sort of a way, you did that in South Africa. Correct. You did that in Johannesburg. You're this outsider. You came and you ended up on this platform. But I had a huge advantage because South Africa was literally on the knife edge. You guys are so young, you won't remember it. But every time you see Gaza or you see Sudan or you see Ukraine,
Libya,
that could be South Africa. South Africa would have been times 10.
Yeah.
It was on an absolute knife edge. And I got involved in 702, doing the sport, got a little bit more politically involved, found myself on talk radio. And there was this incredible opportunity. Thank goodness. Now, I'm not a very religious person, but if I was, I would say thank you for throwing Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk together. Now, I'm not comparing the two of them,
yes,
but I'm saying that the fact that they were together and saw this opportunity. Now, one of the problems in South Africa was that by definition, apartheid put you into a pigeonhole. You're a black person from Soweto. This is basically who you are. You're an Indian person from, I don't know, wherever. This is who you are. You're an Afrikaans person from Pretoria. You're a white person who goes to Wits. Everyone was in a little bit of a box. And suddenly there's this Irishman who's a white rugby player, but he sounds quite, liberal. Or who the hell is this guy?
Yeah.
And that was the beauty that I had. And as a result, one of my great mentors was a guy called Ian Grace, Australian guy, absolute genius. And I remember on 702, especially when the emails came in, the level of abuse that I used to get. I mean,
what would they say?
Well, I'll tell you, because I can remember the best one ever, and I've quoted it before. This was actually before. This was a letter I got, but it'll give you an idea. It said, "Dear Mr. Robbie," which I thought, oh, that's nice. And I looked at it. It said, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. You are an effing communist. Every night I go to bed dreaming of pouring petrol on you and setting fire to it and falling asleep listening to your screams as you die a horrible death." I remember it word for word.
Wow.
But the amazing thing, it was signed a concerned Christian, which made me laugh. But the point I'm getting at is, the level of abuse was terrible, and it was quite upsetting.
Yeah.
Because as long as sort of, well done, John, you're doing a great show, keep it up, and then there were this poisonous stuff. And I remember discussing this with Ian Grace. And Ian said, and it applies as much today, it applies as much to you, Tando, that he said, every time you get a letter of congratulations, you must just raise your hand and say, yay. He said, every time you get a letter slamming you, you must do a lap of honor around the desk. Because the good radio people have got people who like them listening to you. But the great radio people have got the people who don't like them listening as well. And I've always remembered that and always passed it on to anyone in radio. But I feel like I'm talking about the Old Testament here.
No,
it's so long ago.
No. This absolutely applies to this very day. We're in conversation with John Robbie. I think about you more often than you might think. In fact, every time I walk at Cedar Square by the Khaliks, I say to myself, Khaliks, for the businessman who knows what he wants.
Tell him I sent you.
Tell him the first
suit I ever bought in Johannesburg was at that Khaliks, and I remember thinking to myself, should I tell them that you sent me? Do I get a discount if I tell them? How does that all work?
Well, Mohammed says that even today, now I've been retired 9.5 years, that I think 75% of their customers say, John Robbie said, tell him I sent you.
Wow.
And it happened out of, let me go back again. I mentioned Alan Jones. And when I started off on radio, and can you imagine, in those days when I started off, we had to read ads for cigarettes.
What do you mean?
We had to read ads for cigarettes, which was something as a sportsman I had huge problems with. So I went to see Stan Katz, who sort of said, if you don't like it, leave. That's part of the job. And I always had a problem doing the ads. 1 minute I'm trying to save South Africa, and the next minute I'm telling someone about Khalik suit scent or whatever. And I went to see Alan Jones in Australia, and I listened to him for a week. I wasn't allowed to speak to him. And at the end of a week, I was allowed to meet the great man. And at this stage, I wanted to buy a Holden station wagon because he'd been reading the ads for Holden. I didn't know what it was, but my goodness, I wanted to buy it. And I said to him, Mr. Jones, I said, you read the ads like your life depends on it.
Like you mean it.
And he looked at me like I was something the cat dragged in. And he says, do you work on a commercial station? And I said, yeah. He says, well, your life does depend on it. And that's when I realized. It's not me punting the product. It's the company that produces that product taking a risk on 702. It's the salesperson who has been out there busting his or her ass to get them to take that chance. And for me not to give it everything. And I found it was fantastic. And I used to go and meet the companies, the products, chat with them.
The salespeople upstairs are probably having a party right now saying,
honest time somebody tells them.
Honestly, to go out and do that was fantastic. And I'll never forget, when I retired, and it was very nice, and I was given awards and presents and everything. Oh, it's lovely when you go. And I got a present from the South African Stainless Steel Association. They came on with ads. Now, can you imagine anything so boring to read about when you buy stainless steel, check it's got the stainless steel. And I went and found out, and they said, no, look, there are inferior products, there are people passing stuff off, etc. It's actually vital, and there are thousands of jobs that depend on it. So all we're saying is, if you want to, A, get the quality, and B, support South Africa, check for this little mark. And my goodness, did I make that something important. And they said thank you. And the other side of it is, when I started off in the morning show, we had 0 adverts. With 0, the second time I came back, long story, 702 was not doing well. And we had no adverts. We used to put in some promotions to break things up and some jingles and so on. We had no adverts. When I finished, we had 5 spots an hour. So it was 12 minutes an hour was adverts.
Wow.
And I don't think we had a single complaint about it, because using radio techniques, you can make, I'm talking about budgets not being spent, which is disgraceful with the hospital and needs investigation. I'm talking about the sport. I'm talking about Arsenal winning and, whether Pirates are going to win. I'm talking about the weather and the traffic. And then I'm telling you, if your son is going to these matric balls and he needs a dress suit, for goodness sake. So I made it very much a part of the show. Nothing. I'm too stupid
to think of that. It's like a power spot. What do we call a power spot now?
Whatever it is now. But make it interesting and make it interested. Make your people interested in it.
You got many sponsorships after that. You had a car sponsorship.
Well, yeah, Hyundai put my kids through university.
Wow.
Mercedes-Benz, they were all fabulous after a while and came through. I used to get cross that every 3 months I got a new Mercedes-Benz and I had to change the CDs.
What nice life problems.
I used to get cross. The day I retired from 7, oh my goodness, I realized what it was. But it's like everything in radio. You've got your talent, and you're there, and you've got something to say, and there's obviously that I suppose it's an art rather than a science. But behind it, you have a format. And it's like everything else. There's a professionalism and there's a format and there's a best way of doing it. And that's not to tie you down. As Stan Katz used to say, the format sets you free. How you throw forward to things, how you go back to things, how you all sorts of the little things in radio. And by doing that, it sets you free to be yourself and makes you sound better. And but having said that, gosh, when we started, it was so amateur. We, especially talk radio.
Yeah, because you also there was no blueprint necessarily, right?
Nothing, no blueprint at all. I mean, I told the Minister of Health to shut up.
You did, and I really want to talk about that.
Just as long as you don't play it.
I couldn't find it.
Oh, you can't, because I made Prime Media swear.
I looked everywhere and I couldn't find it.
It was 1999. It was the midst of the AIDS lunacy.
Yes.
Where our president believed that HIV didn't cause AIDS, and 350,000 people died, unnecessary, horrible deaths because of it. And we had the Minister of Health on, and it was the most dreadful interview. I mean, I can tell you the background to it if you want. It'll take a moment.
It was something about the Democratic Alliance having sent a letter saying that AIDS comes from aliens.
That's what it was. I got the minister on, and she said, no, it was only one of 1,000 pieces we sent. Anything to do with AIDS, we put in a bundle, sent to each province, and they'd focused on one little thing, And I said, oh, that explains it. Let's get the DA on. Now I look up and I got 5 minutes of the interview left. And so I said, desperately thinking of something to say, well, why didn't you put a little note on it saying, how's this for lunacy?
Yeah.
And she said that there is no lunacy, there is no confusion. And I said, oh, yes, there is. Now, hold on. And that's where it led. And it ended up with me
hanging up, very
unprofessional and saying, I've never heard such rubbish in my life. So in the same interview.
It's crazy that you'd get in trouble for that, because that sounds like something I would say anyway, to a minister now. And I don't imagine I'd get in trouble for that.
In the same interview, I gave the most unprofessional interview I've ever done, or has been done anywhere in the world. And yet it was the most powerful. Because I remember a week later, Kader Asmal, who I think was the Minister of Water Affairs, stood up in Parliament and put his hand up against the policy. So I'd love to think, and I met him years afterwards, and we had a chat about.
But also, John, that's what you did, right? So pre-democracy, white South Africa was calling you the K Buti. Post-democracy, black South Africans, were against you. So it's like either way, you're doomed.
Me.
I mean, there was
a
story of, and I'll quote you: "Say I've seen braids which are fantastic, and I've seen braids which have been over the top showbiz."
Oh no! That was that's one of the reasons I actually just decided to call it a day. It was just the beginning of social media.
Yeah.
And there was a story, I think it was Pretoria Girls High, where it was something to do with black girls' hair, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have hair, so how can I talk about hair? And we'd had a very, very serious show, and it was very political, and it was very heated. And then at the end, I thought, last half hour, let's take an issue, because we didn't like to do silly issues, but you can have a fun issue that is still worth something, if I can put it that way. And I threw this out, and I remember a very, very irate young lady came on the line and told me, as a white South African, I had no right to have an opinion. And I sort of said, well, isn't that what the Nazis said? You're not allowed to have an opinion.
Yeah.
Don't be silly. And it got a little bit heated. And I remember what I said. I said, I know nothing about hair. Joke. I got no hair. And I know nothing about ladies' hair or black ladies' hair. But I have seen some magazines, and some of it looks over the top and Hollywood. Some of it looks over the top and Hollywood. Now, the Sunday Times had brought out a daily edition. And the next day, that had transferred into John Robbie said all black women's hair is over the top and Hollywood. I mean, it was just ludicrous. And in a funny sort of a way, social media, although it can be a wonderful power for good, is also the most toxic, poisonous, work of the devil that ever was involved. And in a funny sort of a way, that was one of the things that maybe said, maybe it's time to move on. But gee whiz, you've got a good memory.
There's some people who love you, who have been waiting for a while. John on the line. Sam and Santon, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me on the line. John, it's just wonderful to hear you back on the radio.
Thanks, Sam.
I think you should host the show from now on.
you can't afford me.
This is true.
I'm joking. Hi, Sam. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I just wanted to say that you really had an impact on my life growing up, and I suppose I'm more mature, over 50. But I say in the last 20 years, just listening to you and your no-nonsense interviewability was just incredible. And I always take you, and I quote you often, or I use you as my moral compass. So I always say to my kids or at work to say, what would John Robbie say if you did this? So if it's drinking underage, driving underage, and you have an accident, and I say, I let you do that, and John Robbie interviews me, what would he say to me? And that always keeps me in the straight and narrow. And I tell my kids, I tell my work colleagues, and if it's a political discussion, if it's a work discussion, and it's tricky and difficult, and you think you can err just off the right moral compass line, I always say, what would John Robbie say?
Oh, gosh, Sam,
I really appreciate that.
I know if my wife, Jenny, is listening to this, she's laughing and is going to give me hell over this one, because I ain't a saint and was never a saint. All I will say is that, and I think this is where, without sounding like an old fogey, giving in, well, I suppose that's what I am, but some people put an act on. And some people are brilliant at putting acts on and voices and a persona on radio. And I was never clever enough to do that. And so all I will say is that what you got on radio was the same as what I am off radio. And I think that was helpful. And I think people appreciate it.
Are you then cutting the slush with your kids as well?
Oh, don't mention. Flipping
Cut the slush.
That is another story that came out of... Can you change Wikipedia? Can you change it?
You actually can. You can edit.
Please take it away.
Yeah.
What used to happen was, and bear in mind, we were on the cusp of a new South Africa. I mean, this was, we were living through history. And in a way, on 702, we were making history, because here was this country that had never really had real discussion. And here we were having real discussions that affected life and affected the country, and it was incredible. And I was used to sort of growing up in Ireland and in bars where you had chats and arguments, you bounced around, and you shut up, what do you think? And you'd take the mickey out of this guy 1 week, and that was the bounce. And that's in a way why I think I was quite good at talk radio. But other cultures would say, "Hello, John. How are you? So nice to speak to you."
I'm fine.
I'll cut the slush because I'm looking at the lines. I've got 20 calls up there. I've got people saying it's time for ads, whatever. So all I meant was, don't give me compliments.
Yes.
Let's get to the point. But now to be defined by that one dreadful.
Irene in Cosmo City, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm so excited to hear John. How are you, John?
Who is that I'm talking to?
Irene.
Hello, Irene.
It's Irene. Hi. I started listening to you in 2007 when I just got married. My husband was very obsessed with you, and we often talk about you and miss the real conversations in the mornings and taking on service delivery where it needed to be taken on, and I miss that.
Oh gosh, that's so nice. Irene, if you can see me, I'm blushing. I'm blushing here.
I'm blushing myself.
Irene in Cosmo City, thank you so much for your call. We are still in conversation with John Robbie. I'm going to cut this slush and go to ads.
Your story on 947 Drive.
With Tando.
Getting up close and personal.
With the people behind the stories.
In conversation with John Robbie on your story. I mean, throughout your, what was it? How many years were you on 702?
30.
30 years.
Wow.
30 years on 702.
I mean, we spoke about the Mantu Shabalala Msimang saga. Were there other moments you got into trouble?
I got into trouble lots of times. I mean, the funniest was Darius Matibia, who I worked with for 25 years, was my engineer.
Oh, yes, Darius.
Darius, hey, if you're listening, Darius, I miss you, man. And we did an outside broadcast in New Zealand. We could always do outside broadcast if there was a reason for it. So the World Cup rugby was obviously a big one.
Nice,
so we'd always do the first week away. And we were in a music studio, and it wasn't the most modern, let's put it that way. It was a bit rickety and fine. And the system was, when we went to the spots, now we had 5 an hour, so we had to be very slick and throw forward and all the techniques that I talked about earlier. And we were there blazing away. And then I said to Darius, and we'll be back with our guest after this. And he was supposed to go into the spot. And something completely bizarre came out, you see. And I said, "What the F is that, Darius?" You see, and his eyes were like saucers.
Yeah.
And then it pointed up to the on-air, so I sort of said, "What the Oh, no, terrible. And so he just had to laugh, and I had to come clean and say, "Look, guys,
Mistake.
This is what's happened with this way where we are." And another famous one was when there was dead air. After a certain time, now bear in mind, in the early days, we came from Baputetswana, the radio, the signal came, and the government used to cut us off often. They would just pull the plug somewhere, and we went off air quite a lot.
Based on what you said, or
based on what we said? We were, remember, the Farayas, and I remember that we were told that if we go off air for a certain amount of time, if there's dead air, the music will kick in, and in between the political stuff and everything, we used to love getting the odd guest who was wacky guest or something or other, whatever. And we got someone on to hypnotize me. And I'd never been hypnotized, and I've always wanted to be hypnotized. And I was there, and this person was trying to hypnotize me. And I think it nearly worked, because I was in front of the pyramids, and I was listening to something, and I thought, I'll add to the... And Stan Katz and Rena Broomberg were in their car saying, please start talking, we're going to go off air. But anyway, I managed to start talking, and I said I was giving a speech on the edge of the pyramid. And then a listener phoned up and said, I know, because I was there listening.
What?
What?
Regression and going back into the past.
Hectic.
And something came, I'm sure it was my imagination.
Yeah.
But then a listener said, oh no, I was there 4,000 years ago listening to you, etc.
Wow.
So you never know who's listening. And you can have great fun as well. You can have great fun on radio without ignoring that the big story is the news. The big story is the news. You can do light things without being silly. You can change somebody's lives. You can take a call and help. And that was one of the lessons that I learned. You don't have to be silly to lighten things up, etc.
Speaking of lighting things up, here's John's Baba's Dre. Mumford and Sons, where are you now?
Wow. Where are you now? Wow.
Do you know it?
Can I tell you, this album was one of the first albums I ever bought, and it's one of the few albums that I say has no skips on it.
Sure.
Babel is such an incredible album.
I was complaining like all old people do about modern music, and saying, why isn't it? And I sounded like my dad. Why is the music all this? Why is, I can't listen to rap music. In fact, I got into big trouble. I said, can we have any of that C-rap? You see, and then, what's C, oh God, was I in trouble for that, And while we were talking about it, we were actually listening to this radio station in my wife Jenny's car. And I was saying there's no decent music. And suddenly,
that song came
Mumford and Son came up. It actually wasn't that song.
Yeah.
And I was hooked, and I realized, shut up, old man.
Yeah.
You're just too old to comment on it. But I think they're fabulous. And one of them went to Millfield School, where my kids go now.
Oh, wow.
So it's a nice little coincidence.
Well, Mumford and Son is today's Vava's J track. John Robbie, on your story. And I mean, even just off air, we've been given like pearls of wisdom.
No,
for real.
Don't say that.
No, for real. I mean, looking back over the 30 years, and I'm sure you've seen it all happen, pre-democracy, post-democracy. What's the one show that's like standouts in your mind?
Well, it has to be, I've said it before, when we started off, we were making it up as we went along. And when Nelson Mandela came out of jail, my producer, Alan Matthews, who's now, very much in prime. In fact, all my ex-producers,
they all are bosses.
They're all big bosses here. Look at me, I'm still scrambling. But we were so naive. We drove down to Villakazi Street and we knocked on the door and said, yes, the domestic goddess answered the door. And we said, we're looking for Mr. Mandela. And she said, oh, he's not here. So, oh gosh. So we drove into town. I think it was Shell House then, and we went in, and it was literally something out of a movie. There were hundreds of people here. Now, bear in mind, the country had gone from apartheid to heading for a democracy almost overnight. FW never told his wife, never told his cabinet, nothing. Suddenly people were arriving from country areas looking for jobs, whatever. Now, we walked into this great big hall, Alan Matthews and me. Now, he was a primary school teacher. I'm an ex-rugby player.
Yeah.
And we're walking in, and there's absolute chaos there. People running around with bits of paper, trying to get people this, that, and the other. And someone said, hello, John. And I looked around, and it was Murphy Morobi, who was one of the leaders of the 1976 rebellion. And he said, what on earth are you doing here? And we said, we were hoping to arrange for Nelson Mandela to come on our little 10 o'clock radio show. And he said, oh, I don't think that would be possible. I mean, he was traveling all over the world, as you probably know. And we said, oh, thanks very much. And suddenly he came back and said, oh, what about Joe Slovo?
Wow.
Now, Joe Slovo was, to many South Africans, the devil incarnate. He was the white communist who'd gone overseas, who was a general in the Russian army, who wanted our minerals and plant, this, that, and the other. And they were having the first legal Communist Party rally in 30 years the next week. And Murphy thought, well, let's get him on. So 10 o'clock to midnight, Alan Matthews, myself, Ian Crew, the late Ian Crew, who's the newsman, were there. Empty studio down the end of town there by Selby. And in come a couple of bodyguards, and Joe Slovo came in. He recognized him from all these posters. And there was this very elderly gentleman with him. And we didn't know he was, but elderly man, silver hair. And it was Raymond Mhlaba, who'd just come off Robben Island.
Wow.
With Nelson Mandela.
What?
And we sat here.
Yeah.
It's the darkness outside Johannesburg and people phoning in. And here was this Satan and Satan's helper who are here on the radio in South Africa. And I'll never forget, the very first caller was somebody called Josie Grinrod, who phoned in, white lady, and she said, Mr. Slovo, it's wonderful to have you back in South Africa. And then the show bounced along, and there was criticism and this, and it was like 2 hours went nowhere. And our show was sponsored by Olsen's Lager, which was the beer for the new generation. And we were this little funny radio show, which was the show for the new generation. So obviously the sales goddesses who I paid tribute to, or gods, earlier had put the two together. So we were the John Robbie show, 10 o'clock to midnight. Talk at 10. Sorry, Talk at 10, the show for the new generation. And so it finished at 12 o'clock. And as the music went up, fantastic show. I mean, you just felt the whole world was listening. And Joe Slovo looked and said, I don't suppose there's any chance of any of the of the sponsors' products.
He wants a beer.
He wants a drink. So Alan, man, we're juniors in 702.
Yeah.
We looked at each other. And hang on a second. So Ian Crew went and broke into Stan Katz's office because he knew Stan Katz had a bar in the office. And we sat there for 2 hours drinking with Raymond and Slava and Joe Slovo.
Wow. Yeah.
Talking about, and it was just a memory I'll never forget. So,
I mean, we could talk forever, but I mean, you were instrumental.
I can talk forever. Ask my wife. Ask my wife. Ask my kids.
I mean, the number of people who you've been instrumental in their careers, Dan Moyane, you were just telling us John Perlman started off as a sports presenter on your show.
On my sports show. Mark Gleason used to do sport, and the SABC said we can't have him on this program. And so I said to Mark, can you think of anyone? He said, we've got this youngster who knows a lot of us stuff. I think he's in the Mail and Guardian. And can you believe John Perlman and I used to go to Soccer City and we'd watch Chiefs against Sundowns, and we used to sit behind the goal. John Perlman somehow had got himself, and he used to carry a camera. So obviously he got in as a photographer. So there'd be 50,000 people there. And there'd be me and John Perlman sitting behind the goal. And I remember once chatting to Gary Bailey. When Gary Bailey was in goal for Kaiser Chiefs, he'd say, hey, John, what are you doing? How are you doing? Oh, sorry. And he'd dive and save a ball. And then he'd say, oh, yeah, how are things going, this, that, and the other? And one day, Abdul Bamji came walking out and came round the back and said, hey, John, Abdul Bamji was the man who ran South African soccer with an iron fist. What are you doing here? And I said, we're just covering the game. He said, I really don't think you should be here. So John Perlman, he's just giving me a wave now from 702. So, but can I just say it's wonderful now. I'm 70. I turned 70 in November.
Yes.
Can't believe it.
Yes.
I've got gout. Can you believe it? I've got to have an eye operation.
Older than 40.
Oh, you lie like a cheap carpet.
I have to ask you this.
But let me just finish.
Okay.
One of the most incredible things is to see youngsters coming through and to see people that along the way maybe, I've had a little bit to do with whatever, and to see them flying, and it's fabulous. And as I say before, my ultimate hero is Trevor Noah. Yeah. So next time you see him, tell him I'm his biggest fan ever.
We'll tell him that you sent us to tell him that he's the greatest.
John Robbie sent you.
Last question. Your thoughts on Rassie Erasmus and his transformative approach on rugby?
Unbelievable. Rassie Erasmus has done more than 99% of the politicians in this country. And the funny thing is, I mean, I played rugby here. People say, did John Robbie play rugby? That mouth on the radio, that guy used to shout all the time. Did he play rugby? And of course, that was my first career, if you like. And Rassie came just after me as a player. And then I covered rugby on Super Sport and everything. I got fired, but that's a different, long story. And in all the time I've been in South Africa, 45 years, I think I've met every major rugby player except Rassie Erasmus.
Sure.
I've never, ever met him. And I look at him, and sometimes I think he's bonkers. And sometimes I think, my goodness, how could you do that? But what he has done in taking people together, I mean, people love to think back to the 95 World Cup, the first win. And people forget that a lot of black South Africans weren't supporting the Springboks because they were saying this is, normal sport in an abnormal society. This is not what it's all about. And then, of course, 96, the Cup of Nations, winning the soccer was fantastic. And I can remember up to, 7 or 8 years ago, going to Springbok games against the All Blacks, and a lot of black South Africans were wearing all black kit. And then Rassie came along and said, look, we pick on merit.
Yeah.
And it's not a payback time. It's not a punishment. There's no quota system, whatever. Who's the best captain? Sia Khaleesi. We put him in as captain. And you don't hear about quota systems or anything now.
No.
And South African rugby is incredible. And I watch this varsity rugby now. And I see little kids coming through who are the next Cheslin Colbys, who in my day would never have got a chance.
Yeah.
And I say, Rassie, what you have done for this country is incredible. And there's so many other incredible stories. For all the bad stories here, there are thousands of good ones, and his is a particularly good one.
Yours is a good one as well, John. You've borrowed us literally most of your life. Some of us have learned to talk radio and radio in general through you. I mean, even these 1.5 hours that we've sat here with you.
Is that how long it's
just been so informative.
I laughed when you apologized to the news people for being late.
I'm so sorry for being late.
Because I used to I hate being late.
There we go. There we go.
Hold on, final story. I hate being late.
Yes.
I hate it. Like you saw, I was here an hour before.
Yes.
I hate being late.
Yes.
And I said this once, and Katie Catapodis, news editor of 702, says, how can you say that when you were late for every single news bulletin? Cheers, guys. Lovely to see you.
We love you, John.
John Robbie!
It's all the stories that matter.
And the people behind them.
You're plugged into
Your story on 947 Drive with Tando.